Hey Dan, are you seeing everybody? Oh, can you hear me, Dan?
I can hear you, and I'm just seeing you. I'm not seeing everybody.
Yeah, well, Yumi and Bonnie are the only ones on yet. Jeff Cook is in
Oh,
the
no,
attendees
no,
list.
okay.
Okay.
All right. Looks like folks are rolling in.
Is Angela, I didn't hear that Angela wasn't going to be here. Did Bonnie or anybody else hear that?
Michael, you texted her. Do you get a response?
I did, but I did not get a response from her. I asked her if she was experiencing the same kind of hyperlink issue that we had, and she has not replied.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep track of my cell phone and see if I can reach her as well.
Yeah.
All right, I will get on this with Brittany and I, and between the two of us, we'll try to get her on as quickly as possible if she's available.
Usually
Thank
she
you.
is, and so it's just a little early still. So on my microwave, it's 7:59, guys. Just saying. So we got a
Okay.
minute. So
Okay. I do we are recording already just because
oh,
of some snafu, but that's
okay.
okay too.
Okay.
So are we waiting to get started? Is that where we landed?
I don't know because I don't. Who else do we need to have?
I think this is us, and
Oh, okay.
we're recording right now.
All right. So with that, I will call the welcome to the Thursday, October 9th, 2025 Public Works meeting for the City of Tumwater. And with us, we have Council Member Althauser and myself, Council Member Swarthout. And so the first order of business we have is the approval of the minutes for the September 4th and the September 18th minutes for the Public Works meetings. I do have a correction to the September 4th meeting minutes because I believe that was the one that had us. That was a short meeting, and the minutes looked like we adjourned at 8:15 p.m. rather than 8:15 a.m. And so I had asked if we could have those corrected. So I don't know if the minutes have been corrected yet to show that we didn't have um, a 12-hour meeting rather than a 15-minute meeting. So I'm not sure what to do about that.
Oh, go ahead, Karen.
The minutes still show 8:15 p.m., so I suggest that in your motion, you move to approve with that correction.
Okay. All right. So I moved to approve the minutes for the September 4th meeting with the adjustment that the meeting actually ended at 8:15 a.m., not 8:15 p.m., and the September 18th minutes as presented.
So moved? Or wait, you moved? I second it.
Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so now on to our real order of business. We'll be discussing the capital facilities plan for the 2026-2031, the water, sanitary sewer, and storm drain. So with us, we have Dan Smith. And welcome this morning, Dan.
Dan, you are muted on my end.
And I'm muted, and I guess it wouldn't be a technological morning without something like that. Do you see notes on my screen, or do you see the presentation?
We see the little slides on the side as well.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have no notes, so it would be really probably better for us just to see that. Do you see the whole presentation now?
Now we see the big picture. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if we can get through the rest of this this presentation. without
Was it
any,
just because it rained this morning? What's going on, guys?
Who knows? Who knows? It's a Thursday, Monday. It feels
It's
like.
a Thursday, Monday. All right, we'll take it. All right.
Okay, well, as you noted, Chair Swarthout, we're here to talk about the 26th to 3rd, 2031 Capital Facilities Plan as it's presented by the utilities for drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. You've seen these handful of slides before, and so, instead of Brandon asking what was he talking about, I'm asking what was Brandon talking about, with general information. You recognize that this is part of the Capital Facilities Plan. These are not independent financial commitments for the utilities. They're just part of a multi-year forecast that we go through to evaluate our priorities for projects and major elements, in this case, to support and work for and advance the utilities. Two categories. Last time Brandon was here, you saw the general governmental fund and the transportation funds. And today we're going to go over the water, sewer, and storm drain. As Brandon had mentioned before, how projects get on there through these myriad of plans, through our operations work and development of and maintenance of our facilities and assets that the city owns and maintains out there. So it's not in a plan. It's been operated on by one of our operations staff, and recommendations were made through a process prior to bringing these plans forward to you. Last time you saw about a $220 million program for the general fund and transportation that's put forth by Brandon. Today we're going to talk about the 50 projects and, of upwards of $110 million for the water, sewer, and storm utilities. So without further ado, is there any questions on the general nature before I just kind of jump in and go over some of the new projects and kind of where we're at with the facilities? Okay. So as you know, water fund, as enterprise funds, the funds that we collect for the utilities can only be used on those utilities. In this case, this is drinking water, but they can support a wide variety of activities and projects underneath the water utility. So including programmatic activities for wellhead protection and water conservation. You'll see that we're focusing these last couple of years on some security and infrastructure integrity projects. Such as the Palermo fence kind of restoration, making sure that we have our facility secured. We focus on water quality improvements for the drinking water that we provide our community. We look at potentially we're providing for redundant and resilient systems, so not just duplicating systems in case of a failure, but also a resilient system in case of a natural disaster or other disaster that the city might face into the future. And speaking of future, these projects can support future demands, aka growth. We are required through the Growth Management Planning Act to be looking to the future, and as a utility, being able to provide for that growth that our community is anticipating. These funds can also support building and facilities, supporting utility operations and administration. As you know, we have a major project for a new public works facility on the books, and it affects all three of the funds you'll see today. I'm only going to show you one fund, or one picture of that, and we can go into deep details if you like on the various implications to each of the utilities. However, it's a very similar conversation and story that you'd already discussed with Brandon, and you'll see here again today for the water utility. With the utilities, we have a fewer options on revenue sources. The primary one being the utility rates that the city charges for the services we provide through each of the utilities. We also, for the water and sewer utility, we have connection fees. These are for new customers coming online that would pay for that anticipated growth in the system that's been built preceding their connection to it. We have state and federal grant options, and then obviously loans, bonds, and debts, and then some other miscellaneous revenues. I chuckled the other night when I was putting this together, and I noticed donations were on here, and I don't think we've had donations necessarily for the utilities, aside from our incentive programs that really keep our programs running. So that just made me giggle a little bit. So we have 14 projects in the water fund, CFP, totaling about just over $50 million. We completed or moved a couple of projects since the last round of this, but a lot of these projects remain. We only have 2 new projects this year. We'll go over those pretty quickly, and I'll categorize the remaining projects for you in a kind of more of a broad brush. We removed the resource conservation and sustainability project line in the water fund CFP, and that was primarily due to the fact that we underwent an investment grade audit in 2024. And through that audit process, they evaluated all of our facilities. They looked at our pumps. They looked at our equipment that we're using down there. And you know, despite the fact that, you know, the water utility is probably one of the largest energy users in the city, as we've learned through our green team process. But we're running it as efficiently as we possibly can. And that was really good news for us, you know, as we went through that process, that we couldn't really identify any projects that were going to substantially increase our efficiency and resource conservation through the water operations. You recall we acquired some water rights from the city of Lacey. That was a major acquisition last year. And so while, you know, the project still remains as a placeholder for upcoming water rights, that was a major significant acquisition, and there really isn't very much more out there. The city is pursuing current water rights at a property, and once that is done, you know, the majority of available water rights for the city will have been acquired. And we will be looking at other options for water resource development or source development, which we completed the project source development planning. You recall through that process, we determined that water conservation is our next biggest viable source of water. And so we are pursuing that as I speak. So the first major, or the first new, not major project, it's the first new project for our drinking water CFP this year, is the Bush Wellfield Deep Monitoring Wells. This is really looking at wellhead protection efforts to maintain one of our largest producing well field. The water quality maintains high quality there. And so we want to install 2 to 4 monitoring wells. We do have monitoring wells within that wellhead area and adjacent to the Bush wells. However, there's more shallow aquifers, so we would catch more superficial introduction of any contaminants that could potentially get in there. So there's a very large industrial area that surrounds the Bush well field. The superficial monitoring wells are intended to be able to capture anything that might impact those wells from the surface down. These we want to go lower in the aquifer to make sure that if there are sources from anywhere outside of that immediate surface area, that we're also potentially catching those and kind of creating a greater net around our wells, so to speak, for that. We'd also use this to monitor seasonal fluctuations, if any, in the deep aquifer, as well as look at, in conjunction with the shallow monitoring wells that we have, making sure and seeing how the implications of climate change might be affecting those, and groundwater withdrawals might be affecting those water levels over time. Pretty straightforward. Any questions on this project? No?
Just the location again, it's down by, this is the one, the larger one that's down by Bush Middle School, is that correct?
Correct. It's on the perpetual easement that the city has from the port that's right adjacent to the property of the Bush Middle School.
Okay, and then you said that they're already currently, we have some that are already down there?
Correct.
The 2 that you said are monitoring shallow?
Yes, and so when I say shallow, I'm talking between 10 feet and 70 feet. So it's fairly shallow.
Okay.
We want to go deeper than that because there are multiple aquifer layers in that area that we want to make sure that we are tracking the water quality and the water levels in.
So this will be additional support to monitor. Again, I just want to be clear about what's
correct.
Yeah, additional support for that area. Okay, and it doesn't look like we're doing that one until 2027 then, as far as the installation of that one.
We're going to be
plan for that one.
We're going to start some of the engineering next year. Let me go back a slide. Yeah, we're going to start some of the engineering next year. A lot of it is in-house. Some of it is going to be just evaluating and reviewing geology logs to make sure we're hitting the right locations that we want to hit. If we do have an opportunity to pursue something earlier, whether it be using grant funding from from a resilience program, something like that, we are looking for those options to do something earlier. It is not currently budgeted as in our current biennium budget. So we could reevaluate that, in the timing of this, should the need really arise, or if we, like I said, if we can find some grant funding, which we're looking for to do for something like this.
So do you think the cost would be, the 100,000 would cover then, as far as, because it looks like that would be the construction cost? Is that for design and the whole 9 yards? Okay.
Well, we can accomplish the design fairly inexpensively. It's a fairly straightforward design once we know
Right.
the layers of the aquifer, how deep we're going. Fairly straightforward design, which we can accomplish fairly easy, and hoping to have those done by the end of this year or the end of next year. I'm sorry, 26. With bids going out to drillers, because they would be deeper wells. We need to bring on certified drillers to come in and do that work. It would be 27, but early on in 27.
Okay, yeah, we've had some interest for this kind of so we've had some interest in this area, so it's interesting to be able to do this and provide that kind of data. Okay, all right, thank you.
Welcome. The next one, drinking water for 27 and 28. So doing some initial work in 27 and the remainder of most of the construction in 28. This is the zone 454 booster pump station improvement. This is the booster stations that are on the kind of located on C Street, the top end of C Street there. We have a small reservoir and really just for maintenance of water quality, and then that's where our booster pumps take over. Buildings are failing, not failing, but they're not in the best shape. They are some older buildings that we have for our facilities, and so we want to upgrade those buildings, and we want to include a pump replacement and some of the controls that are in there to bring them up to a higher and current standard. Overall, we feel confident that pushing this out a couple of years is okay. Like I said, the buildings aren't failing, but they are old and in need of replacement, including the roof. And so we do have staff that are keeping very close tabs on that. And I think we're out there almost every other day, if not every day, just in our general operations of things. So facilities are under constant surveillance. Any questions on this? It's a fairly straightforward maintenance element. As we put any of these projects, I should also qualify, as we put any of these projects together, you get to see them in more detail as the projects move forward. These are all just kind of concept statements of what those needs are. And as we dig into the projects, that's when we'd really be able to kind of give you the high level details of what's being done in each place. Any questions here? Okay. As I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna really just hit this highlight the public works facility. It is a significant project for all three of the utilities. The costs are being distributed 33% general fund, 28% water, 22% sewer, and 17% storm. Over the course of this past year, with some of the financial modeling we've done with drinking water in particular, we're able to kind of model the actual impacts and the uses for these facilities. And so we adjusted, I believe it's about 5% from previous estimates that you might have seen of water funding, 33%, and with sewer at 18%. And so we actually adjusted those to make them a little bit more compatible and comparable, given the nature of the work that each one of the utilities does with or will be doing at these facilities. We have some mitigation costs strewn in there as well, but the grand total for drinking water would be $14,060,800. This includes the debt service. Or I'm sorry, it does not include the debt service in the overall project totals, but we do include that, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, which helps us look at the financial modeling as we put together the kind of the big picture of the CFP for the utilities there. We presume that construction is going to be financed over 20 years. And I know Troy is working with us on figuring out what is the best option for that financing. For this project and a few other projects, that conversation is ongoing. In particular, I'll be meeting next week with staff from the Department of Health, looking at the source revolving fund for some additional opportunities or options if for loans, or if there's any grants available as well.
Dan,
Yes.
for this slide, my recollection was this was going to be more expensive than. Is this just for the one fund that we're looking at?
Yes.
For this,
so this is just the
28%.
Correct.
Okay, that's what
So
I thought. I was like, oh, man, did we get a good deal? Like,
well, I have
makes sense.
a lot more, consolidated information and things like that. But it's splitting this out into the three utilities. Really, just that let's look at it really at one project here. 3 utilities are defined in the packets that you have. I'm actually going to send you the newest versions of these packets, so you have all that information. And of course, I'm available for any additional questions you might have, on these projects. But I don't even want to give you a ballpark number. I know I have it on a spreadsheet behind this presentation, but that means I have to start moving things, and we might have some challenges with that
No,
this
that's
morning.
that's fine. We're good. Thank you.
Yes, no, that is just for the water fund. As we get to the other funds, I'll highlight what those costs are for those funds, but we won't have a slide and won't discuss that in any really detail. But some of the other projects that were encapsulated on that CFP sheet that are either ongoing or to be started soon. And we have under source development, we still, as I mentioned earlier, we still have some water rights we're looking at acquiring. And we have the Brewery Wellfield project that is in progress. If we're lucky, my fingers are crossed this year that we're going to get the actual bids or the actual specs out and the request for bids to well drillers so we can start drilling wells, within that service area, which would be on and around the golf course for production wells. Once we have those production wells in place, then we can actually start testing the water and determining, what kind of treatment is going to be formally necessary for that. And then concurrently, we would be working with our partner in Olympia to define kind of like an operation kind of program. What does it look like, and kind of memorialize that in a memorandum of understanding or interlocal agreement, some form to take shape as we have those conversations. We have a project at Well 15 is our second highest producer in the city behind the Bush Wellfield. You see it's listed a couple of times here, and that's done purposefully because it is primarily a water quality improvement project, or it started as a water quality improvement project for corrosion control. So to reduce the pH of that water so it doesn't affect our customers' pipes in a negative way, so improving the water quality there. But it's also reliability and resilience. As our number 2 producer, we want to make sure that the facility in and of itself is protected and has redundant features like auxiliary power should we lose power out there. Or other features within that well to make sure that we have that service when we need it. So with resilience, it'd be providing it to a backbone that could withstand earthquake type impacts. I didn't put it on here, but we're also looking at that from a security standpoint. The facility and the asset itself needs some significant improvements to really kind of achieve our security standards for an offsite well. So those are the types of improvements we're talking about there. As you know, we also have the Southeast Reservoir and System Extension project. This is that 3 million gallon tank southeast of town, and the water main extension along 93rd Avenue. A little bit farther out, we want to really take a closer look at the seismic resilience of our entire system. Some of the improvements that have been done already last year, including the mains down Israel, have been planned for to be resilient in an earthquake type situation, and so some beefier materials and some beefier equipment to make sure that these can withstand those impacts. And we're looking at the seismic resilience as a backbone. Not every part of our system is going to have these features because they are very expensive, and they're not necessarily to be throughout the entire system. But we want to make sure that the major production areas and the major community spaces will have access, or should have access in times of those types of hazards. We have a lot of programs and planning going on right now. We have our water conservation plan update that will be happening very shortly, as once we're fully staffed on that side. We have a water main replacement and extension program that is funded through this CFP, albeit a little bit more lightly than we probably would have normally liked. But we have a lot of other projects going on that really complicates the picture when we're talking about capacity, not only within staff but also financially. And we're also going to be looking at an asset management program, more formal program than what we're doing right now. As we build staff capacity, we're learning and we're finding lots of little bits and pieces about our system. We want to make sure that we have the data structures to be able to support replacement of those of that infrastructure, management of that, maintenance of that infrastructure as best as we can. Looking to the future, again, the Southeast Reservoir and the system extension that also is helping to meet future needs. The 93rd extension of water mains would open up a lot of undeveloped area or underdeveloped area in the city with our water system, and that would provide a lot of opportunities. It also provides us with looping within our system to help maintain water quality and distribution of the water in the utility. And again, O&M facility, meeting our future needs, and then with infrastructure maintenance as part of kind of our asset management, water main replacement and extension program. The Capitol Boulevard and X Street water main is programmed into this CFB as well. Any questions on the ongoing and previously listed projects? Fantastic. All right, moving right over to sanitary sewer. Yes. Oh, I thought I heard something. Okay. Again, sanitary sewer, this is the wastewater. So the drinking water utility pulls it out of the ground, gives it to our customers. Our customers give it back to us in the form of wastewater. Then we have to convey that wastewater down to lot. This is, very similar levels of types of projects, infrastructure maintenance, expansion, conversion programs. When we think about septic systems, converting over to public wastewater. We have some significant planning efforts, about to get underway, and we look to meet future demands with the projects in here, and very similar funding revenue source structure for the sanitary sewer. In total, 15 projects. Only one is really truly new. However, there's a sewer extension program I'll highlight for this coming next couple of years, because there's going to be some significant work being done on Trosper Road. So about 15 projects, total about $28 million, $28.7 million for the sanitary sewer fund. And the first big one I mentioned there was the sewer extension program. And this is really funds that we reserve to bring sewers to areas where they don't exist. It helps expedite private septic system conversions, protects drinking water and overall environmental health, and also helps prepare for future development in certain areas. In some cases, the extension program will be in neighborhoods where it's only septic systems, and in those cases, that's where we'd be looking at our septic conversion program that we'll be looking to develop over the course of the next year to 2 years, to determine what those incentives look like, what that program looks like, and how the city recovers some of the funds for the extension of those processes or those projects. The big one here is we received a $5.25 million loan from the Department of Ecology for addressing urban density septic systems along Trosper Road, primarily the Beehive Industrial Area and then moving farther west with sewer lines in protection of water quality and the aquifers in that side of town. So that's a very extensive project. It'll be a lot of just main work, and because you can see here, it's kind of programmed in for doing design and permitting in 2026, and majority of construction in 2027. Beyond 2027 is really kind of that programmed, kind of funds reserved for that programmatic level effort, where we will be determining where those lines would be extended, which neighborhoods were prioritized in a future process. But these would be the earmarked funds out there. The bulk of the project would come in 26 and 27. Councilmember Alhauser.
So for this program, because this is sort of accommodating future development, is there like any kind of latecomers sort of rebates that we're able to recoup when future development does occur, or do we usually only do latecomers for things like water connection?
No, we can do those for sewer as well, and we would expect that would be part of this process as well. So anywhere the city extends a main and there's a future connection, there's a special assessment charge that basically covers that cost or a portion of that cost, for the city. And that list lives in perpetuity. Okay. Unlike a latecomers agreement for private development, a latecomers agreement would expire in 20 years. The special assessments that the city applies would reside in perpetuity. So whenever somebody connects into the future.
Dan,
so
on that one,
for the grand total that just to ask a super quick follow-up. So for the grand total that we have here, we're potentially going to get some revenue back in the future once development does occur through those assessments.
Correct. And we have a number of parcels that we would be working with in the Beehive Industrial Area that we would want to connect up fairly quickly as part of this work. And again, just to protect the local environment and the aquifer and groundwaters in those areas.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Eileen.
Oh, no worries. The delay on Zoom. I was going to ask not having a map, I was just curious how many properties that we were looking at, the potential of connecting.
I want to say off the top of my head, it's about 55 properties, because it's the properties around Beehive Industrial, Industrial Park there, as well as extending a line farther west down Trosper. So there'd be additional properties that, there's some light residential development along Trosper in that area, but this would be looking forward to future growth, for those aspects. So we'd have about probably 20 some odd customers early on, but 55 properties would have access to the sewer as we extend it out.
Thank you.
Okay, and the last one, really just kind of an engineering evaluation. We have the Hickson Siphon evaluation. This is, we've been operating the Hickson Siphon. This is on the east side of town. There has been, it's been operating recently in bypass mode. And we want to make sure that, we have done a number of had a number of replacements out there. We want to make sure that, what's been replaced is actually continuing to work. We have some other automatic valves we want to have evaluated, and then there's an odor issue that we want to reevaluate and determine, if there's any exceedances that are occurring out there. Our early tests and early analysis suggest no. What we're doing is managing the system well, but it is aged, and we want to have a kind of a third party evaluation done, and so that way we can determine if there's any future needs out there, or if what we have is doing exactly what it needs and for how much longer. We'll be able to do that. So that'll occur in 26. Really, again, this is just a kind of a planning effort, not a construction effort. And should be done fairly quickly in 26.
Dan, can you remind us where that is?
It's on the east side of town. I want to say just east of the of Capitol Boulevard and the WashDOT facility on Capitol Boulevard, the former WashDOT facility on Capitol Boulevard. Trying to think of the other names there. Other streets.
I know you're throwing new things in. I got, so I've not heard of this one before. So it's like Hickson Siphon. I got Beaver Deceiver. You keep throwing new terms in. So I'm trying to catch up with you. Hickson Siphon is a new one.
Yeah. This is just so, before our main line that conveys our wastewater to lot downtown, this is kind of right before that, that pipe dives off down the hill towards the valley and meets up with that interceptor pipe for a lot. And so it's kind of the last stop of wastewater, for the city, but it is a fairly significant transition point that we want to make sure continues to operate as it needs to. So again, just an engineering evaluation. As we go to dive into the project, I can bring more information, to you, let you know what we're doing and what we're looking for, and then ultimately what we found.
Thank you.
So that's really the new projects for sanitary sewer. Some of the ongoing things, as I mentioned, we have the sewer infrastructure replacement program, the extension program, which is going to be Trosper for 26 into 28. We're just starting our comprehensive plan update. The last one was done in 2015, so a major. We're due for that plan update, and so we're getting that kicked off. We have the ERP system, which again is affecting all of our utilities. It's the resource program that finance is working on to bring all of our needs and replace our existing programs in there. We have the O&M facility, a regional pump station, and an oversizing program under meeting future needs. Those are both basically fund reserves for for should the city need to develop a pump station where maybe a major development is being proposed. We have funds reserved to help support that, and our oversizing programs are basically where new development is going in, where we require something a little bit bigger than what the development itself requires, and that is a funding source for us to help support that development going in to meet our needs, not necessarily development's needs. And then infrastructure maintenance. This is what we do every day. We go out there, we look at, we repair our facilities. When they get high enough in cost, they end up on this list. And so we have a handful of elements that we're looking at. Infrastructure is more kind of an extension there with Old Highway 99. That's in support of the O&M facility. We have the lift station, Streamland Estates. Some work was done this past year on that. More work is going to be done, more of just kind of the internal bits and pieces of that lift station, the SCADA systems, the pumps, upgrading some of those pieces to meet those future demands and maintain the systems that we have. Same thing with the Kimmy and Lloyd Street lift stations. As part of our comprehensive plan update. We will be doing an analysis of the I-5 crossings of our sanitary sewer. It's a very complex project. Normally wouldn't seem that complex, but getting I-5 to stop traffic at any particular time is difficult. So we have to go in different ways to evaluate those pipes and that infrastructure. So we'll be working with our consultants to do that work and provide a report for us, determine if there's any additional major needs as our wastewater crosses under I-5. And I want to say it crosses over in about 5 places. And so this has been a project we want to have done. So we know what's happening under there. And then an infrastructure project, capital and X as well. Some fairly standard programs or projects. Any questions? Any questions there for what you see? Okay. And last of the funds, stormwater. Again, really these projects, the funds that come into the stormwater utility stay with the stormwater utility. They fund programs for infrastructure replacement and expansion, water quality and quantity improvements, habitat protection and restoration. With the division and department this year, urban forestry projects and programs, and in major significant planning efforts that the utility must undertake. And exactly the same funding sources as the other two, with the exception of connection fees. We do not have a connection fee revenue source here, because development helps build the system as we move along with it, and there are no private connections to a stormwater system. It's really collecting the city's the roadway, the runoff from public roads and public facilities and treats for that. State and federal grants probably our biggest source of funding as we work through some of these projects, but we are looking ahead as we, with the public works facility, et cetera, for bonds, loans, and other types of debt. Some of the major projects we've completed since the last time you saw the CFP for the stormwater. We did some work on Capitol Boulevard to upsize pipes that were identified to be undersized from previous analysis of our stormwater system within that area. We acquired, we are working on a Pioneer Park Deschutes Habitat Restoration. We actually changed the name there because we had bought Deschutes Valley Properties, or in the process of acquiring those, and there were some additional things that the Deschutes Habitat Restoration block, so to speak, reserved funds for. It is really just a project that describes now the Pioneer Park restoration effort that is currently underway, which we have 2 grants for to work on. And so I just wanted to make sure that those names matched. And then lastly, we took out resource conservation and sustainability. That doesn't mean that we're not doing any resource conservation or sustainability. It's just captured into other projects, and there was nothing that was separate enough to call out in its own individual reserve line for this. The concepts of conservation and habitat protection and sustainability roll through every single one of our projects that we have in here. So in total, we got about 21 projects, about $27.5 million in total over the 6 years, over the next 6 years, with only really one new project, which you've already heard plenty about, but it wasn't on our previous CFP, so it has now been added. And that would be our Somerset Hill culvert replacement. We're going to try really hard not to call it fish passage improvement, because I do the same thing every single time I say it. This is funded by a grant from the State Department of Transportation through their PROTECT program. It is the same program that we received monies for the Percival Creek. I'm just going to say culvert replacement to avoid all the longer name. There. So that project, Percival Creek, is going to be constructing next year. This is under design or getting underway for design and permitting this year and into next year. And then we anticipate that construction would take place in 2028, the bulk of it happening there, if not all of it. So then moving back into some of our other projects that maintain on this list, we have the Tumwater Valley Regional Facility. We have the Deschutes Habitat Restoration projects. So while that name was recaptured as Pioneer Park, there are still some smaller pieces that are encapsulated throughout the CFP that address habitat restoration along the Deschutes River. We have the East Linwood Basin outfall retrofit. These are 3 projects that would be, if we're successful in an application to the State Department of Ecology for the Floodplains by Design program. These are 3 projects that would advance under those grant programs for that. I just mentioned the 66 culvert replacement. It's in progress, as well as the 66th Ave culvert replacement that is programmed into the future. Once we get through these 2 major projects, we would look out to 66th Ave for that one. Flood mitigation, so addressing, areas that we know have flood impacts, 54th and Kersop. We have a project and Kersop Road stormwater improvements. While they're the same Kersop Road, there are two different locations on that road for two different types of flood mitigation and water quality improvements. Kreitz Pond in Mottman industrial area is an older pond and routinely needs some improvements, and so we'll be looking at increasing the the footprint of that pond potentially, but definitely improving infiltration rates within that pond so we can reduce some of the flooding that happens in that area. On the maintenance side of things, general program projects in there. We have 29th Avenue stormwater improvements. Again, kind of the Mottman area. We have the Beehive industrial area stormwater improvements that are underway. I think the design has just recently been finished and they're going through a review phase with the state because it's a state funded project. The O&M facility, as mentioned earlier, also underway. The golf course drainage system repairs is more of a kind of a placeholder for where the city's MS4 municipal stormwater system discharges to the Deschutes River through the golf course. These would be funds to help support any kind of repairs that might impact that system down there, as we know that there are some significant challenges of the old infrastructure as it goes through the golf course. We want to make sure that we're prepared, at least financially. When those moments happen. And then on the planning side, we have the ERP that affects the other utilities as well. We have a Tumwater Hill Basin assessment we want to complete. A lot of stormwater in Tumwater Hill is aged. There's been similar challenges that the golf course has experienced with some sinkholes. We've addressed those over the years, but we want to take a comprehensive look at the entire Tumwater Hill and really kind of put together a package of recommended improvements. That we can kind of focus on the geographical area. And then, of course, we reserve some funds for any kind of emergent projects that might come out throughout the year or throughout the 2 years. So we have talked a lot today about the three utilities. Those were the three utilities, the projects that are there. And so before I dive into just kind of the kind of some bigger concepts affecting all three of the utilities and kind of where we're at and what you might see in these packets, addressing rate increases, things like that. Some of the financial plannings that we went into. I just want to just kind of take a moment and see if there's any random questions on the projects, and then I'll get into a little bit of this stuff for the kind of big picture items. Okay.
Are you talking about the financing piece or where we?
Well, this is kind of more of just bigger picture. We're not, getting into any specific issues, but these affect all three of the utilities in generally the same way. And so, I think the last time, I presented on the CFP, we had seen a major increase in just the overall cost of the projects, and that has carried over today. That was, inflation, we saw market forces coming out of COVID, increasing costs for labor, and just in general, even today, I mean, the material prices and the inflation continues to affect our projects. I think Brandon mentioned the other night, with the public works facility, it's just like these aren't getting any less expensive, right? So the longer we wait, the more expensive it's get. And so, we're seeing that across all three of the utilities in these projects as well. The dollars you see here, Councilmember Alhauser, to your question, what are the individual costs for the O&M facilities? You can see, just for the water, it's 14 million. For sewer, it's 11 million. For the cost there. For sewer or for storm, it's similar to the cost that you're seeing here as well. And we have the cost of debt, that's in there, and these are projects we need to finance. Finance allows us to do larger projects and spread those costs out over time, but it does come at a cost. And this is just one of the ways we look at it. As we go through these financial processes or these capital facility plan development, we do a kind of a big picture analysis of where does the utility stand? What's the ending fund balance looking like? Do we meet our reserve policy, which is generally 20% of operation and maintenance plus any debt service that we would have in any given year? And then that helps us determine, do we need rate increases? Are our rates covering our operational costs and our connection fee, helping offset the cost of new development or growth, in the system? And so we've gone through those processes for each one of the utilities. This slide highlights, put my laser pointer up. This slide highlights our water fund. And as you can see, as it's presented, we're meeting our reserve down here. We're not meeting our reserve for the following 2 years. on my spreadsheets. You don't see it here necessarily. It tells us how much we're not meeting those by, and and are they something that we'll be discussing with with our management team and with our finance department is this meets state law. This might not necessarily meet city policy. You can see by the end of the planning horizon, we are back in meeting our reserves, and so it took some rate increases to get there, and then before we can start balancing things out, we could that we're meeting our reserves throughout the entire planning cycle. From my perspective, the most important kind of planning cycle is the next 2 years before we get back into the capital plan, because we want to make sure that we are continuing to meet these immediate needs right in front of us with the immediate projects that are in front of us. Any number of things can change throughout the planning period, throughout the next couple of years that could change this, to the better or to the worse. Generally, the way we plan and we execute these types of these plans, we're very conservative. And so we see that by the time we get out into the future years, funds are available. A project might have been delayed, for a variety of different reasons that makes more funds available. And so these are planning exercises that help us understand what the situation, could be if everything was to fall out as it does on paper, 2.5 years before we start doing the work. And so right now we don't this demonstrates that we're not meeting our reserve, but we do have at least about $2 million each year left in our ending fund balance, we do have about 1.5 million in our ending fund balance until we get back up into 2031, where we're again meeting our reserves and meeting our ending fund balance policies. I think it's on the next slide. Let me see. Yes, and so one of the things I did want to point out is under our financial modeling with our water system. We had just done some major work with our consultants to really look at the efficiency of our rates, the effectiveness of our connection fees, and what the recommendations would be. And one thing I wanted to highlight here in our last capital planning process and in our current biennium, we have prepared a budget that is based off of what you see here in this top line. We are at 6%. We had a 6% increase this year. We'll have we had recommended a 5.5% increase for next year. So that slide that I had just shown you and what you see, it saw us being outside of our reserve policy, still ending with a positive net, a positive ending fund balance, but below where our utility reserve policy wants us and would hope that we were at. And so some additional work was necessary. What I had done here, and so again, this is getting thick and deep into it. Rate efficiency. This is where we want to say if we can be at a ratio of 1, that says that our rates are meeting our operational needs. And as you can see, we started to drop down below that. And a lot of that because of some of those major projects we have that are coming online. We have the capital, or we have the O&M facility, or the public works facility. We have the Southeast Reservoir facility. We have the brewery wellfield. I mean, very big dollar ticketed items, that are challenging our overall capital program. What this does is this gets us back to a 1.4, or actually, as presented, we have a rate efficacy that is getting back to where we need it, 0.999, by the time we hit 2031, with our existing rates that were proposed at 6% this year, 5.5% next year. But with some significant increases in coming years of 9.5 to 9 to get us back to our rates are actually meeting our operational expenses and covering debt service as needed there. So we're not meeting our reserves. We do end with a positive fund balance as currently proposed, and we start building back towards that ratio of 1 to make sure that our rates are covered. What this equals, and that's probably on the next one, is what our rates are looking like. Go ahead, Councilmember Althauser.
Thanks. Can you explain again to me the connection fee increases and why we're dropping it down lower in the future as opposed to trying to keep the rate? Like if that was 5% in coming years and we just kept it at 5 after
Correct.
these 2 years, then maybe the rates could be a little cheaper. Why are we dropping that one down further?
Well, because the higher we make that, the harder the impact to residential development becomes. Because the way the system is built, for commercial type applications, you see here we have, so for example, we have two very large potential users coming online in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
They're not going to buy. So when I look at those users and coming online, what their demands would be, they need approximately, they take maybe 3,000 ERUs. They're not
Mhm.
buying 3,000 individual, $5,500 3/4 inch meters, which is where that connection fee is based on, comes in from. So they're really looking at some larger meters to meet their needs. The rationale for the connection fees then really just becomes, there's a calculation, there's a formula that we've applied historically, that our consultant looked at again last year, and says kind of like, what is a consistent rate that can grow to meet inflation and just kind of the ongoing growth of the economy, as well as address our future need from our projects. And so we take all of our projects, we put them in the blender, and we say, okay, from a residential service connection, what should that cost be? And then how does that apply out in this escalator that you can see here in this top chart,
Yeah.
right-hand side? So, it does, there are significant increases, no matter what level you're at. But if we were to say, make a 10% increase, and really looking at those future impacts as related to commercial development, we need, and your application of the increase has to be consistent, unless there's another way to demonstrate there's some significant impact to a particular industry. But again, the way the rates are applied, you're applying it to a 6-inch meter, you're
Yeah.
applying it to a 4-inch meter, you know what I mean? So that's where your connection fees are. So
That was
just to
that
kind
was
of
sort of my next question too, is like, if we have a very high volume user, they pay the same rate as a residential user for the water. They just buy more water and they pay more money when they connect to a larger diameter water main.
correct.
It seems like, though, that when let's say hypothetically a water bottling company or something would be an example of a high volume user. And if they use a lot of water, it seems like that puts more strain on the entirety of the system, just because they're using more than a residential person would use. Is there such a thing that other jurisdictions have as like a high volume surcharge, to where we can extract revenue from these extremely high volume users that then demand us to make additional investments in the system to make sure that we have the capacity for everybody?
Yeah, so as we went through this process with our consultant, we evaluated that, and there are some limitations to like things like a high volume surcharge. Theoretically, and the way these meter charges are addressed from a connection charge basis, that impact of higher flows is calculated into these costs. And so as you can see, if a 6-inch meter, it's not just 6 times the 3/4 inches. Type thing. It is, it recognizes there's significant more flow that's coming through that line. And so there's again, we take the value of the projects, we look at the number or the percentage of those projects that are attributed to growth, and those then we look at, okay, how are connection fees addressing that growth over time, and what does that increase need to look like? And so our through that entire formula, it looked like we needed to increase it this year about 4.3%. To get us up to the recommended 4750 for a single connection fee per ERU. So again, that's per household. But that 4.5%, and it's actually I think we're doing it higher percent this year just to get us up to to this area we needed. That reverberates all the way through these various categories.
I guess it just sort of seems to me like, when we're looking at the charges for the connection fees, that we're making an analysis based on a static analysis based on today's conditions of system demand, and that doesn't take into account kind of the negative economies of scale of the future, to where if you had a residential area that was using a 4-inch main and we didn't think that there was going to be a rezone to light industrial, to where now you have a water bottling facility next to it, to where you need a 6-inch main instead of a 4-inch main now as a result of that, that there is additional downstream future impacts. But I guess like the difference between these connection fees is, when you go from 6-inch to 8-inch, like then you start really jumping up in the costs. But those seem to be just sort of, because they're one time, not necessarily geared for future strain on the system as much. But maybe that's part of the actuarial calculus that's conducted to determine that figure.
That is part of the increases between each meter size. So that is in the background formula. It is looking towards kind of the future maintenance costs of the system, but mostly it's like when you're building it, you're trying to offset the capital cost of these projects. This is really trying to help offset that capital cost, and your rates are designed to then address the the ongoing maintenance, the replacement costs of any mains, and kind of aging infrastructure, that might be into the future. And so you're looking at those two pieces together to address those future needs from a maintenance perspective. But the connection fee is really to offset that capital outlay of cash the city invests in the system to get there. Now, the rate structure, as you had asked about earlier, yes, it is a higher rate than our residents pay. So I want to say it's tier 2 or tier 3 is where our commercial setting is at for higher users. And so that is intended to one, it's not a tiered rate like it is for our residential base, but it is a flat fee, so that the commercial industries that use this water or access this water have they know what their water uses are, but it is a higher rate to address that higher volume that impacts the city at a kind of a different rate than a standard residential property.
Okay. Well, thank you for indulging my questions about this.
Yeah, no, they're good questions, and it gets complex. And this is, and I did want to bring some of this information together, so
Yeah.
you did
Those
see
are
it.
good. Yeah.
Lisa, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think you answered my question, but I just wanted to kind of reorient my perspective, at least on this. And I think the challenge when we're talking about rates and costs associated with utilities is that, especially when we're talking about the user rates versus the connection fees, they are different and they have a different purpose, each one. So the connection fees are really intended to address the capital. And I think that's where there is some limitation, as I understood Dan's explanation, to how we can charge different types of users for that connection fee. Conversely, the user fees, the rates for the use of the water, that's where we do have the ability to charge more for larger types of users. Is that correct, Dan? Correct statement?
Yes, and we went through a process with our consultant, which is not presented here, and will be something that we'll be looking at as we go towards the budget next year, is what does our rate design look like? There was a series of thought concepts we went through in our planning process. We're not proposing to change our rate structure today, but we do want to look at those things and make sure that they're built in, I guess, equity as we look at the impacts on the system and what does that look like. So there's some additional rate design work that we can do over the next say year, as we look into the next biennium, what our rates look like, that might address some of that. Like, so if there are more intensive commercial users and that is justified, we can maybe potentially address those as we look at our rate design.
Yeah. And then the third thing is, addressing Councilmember Althauser's question about, line sizes. New development that might trigger requirement for increased public improvements also have to do those increases. So in your example, there was a 4-inch water main serving a potential commercial user that needed a 6-inch main, then they are required to actually pay for that upgrade cost. So there's a number of different ways in which the different users are are obligated to pay into the system and help fund the utility over a period of time. So
Correct.
thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helps clarify. Thanks.
And so in the plan that we had done here today, and for as part of this CFP proposal, gets us right in line. As you can see here, 2026, 5787 to 5749 is what was proposed. It gets us right in line with the consultant was recommending for us. What I'm looking at is also a difference on the rates between 5.5%, which we had built our budget off of, or increasing to 6%. The 6% gets us to that endpoint in 2031, where we are back in meeting our reserve policies. We have a strong ending fund balance, and we're ready to move into the next planning horizon. And I just wanted to kind of highlight the difference there. So at 5.5% is this first line. The monthly increase is $2.24 versus in 2026 $2.44. And so you're really talking about a 20-cent difference between 5.5% and 2% on a monthly average utility bill for our customers. And that progresses out, and you can see still the difference between 2020-31 is $1.75 and $2.52 between those. So overall, our water. So we did an affordability analysis, and this is kind of the summary chart of what that looks like. As would be expected, the lowest income kind of analysis that we looked at was $25,000, and that was kind of below the lines. That these customers would qualify for our Lifeline programs and other programs, incentives to help support their utility use. But you can see collectively, it becomes somewhat of a challenge for folks in this lowest income bracket, for our utility bills. However, it's very small and very affordable, using the metrics that we looked at from an affordability standpoint. Our total utility bills for, any customer at median income or above. Obviously, somebody making $481,000 is not going to have a challenge meeting our utility bills, whether it's just for one of the utilities or all of the utilities combined. And so there's additional analysis that we have in the models that we have built. I just brought this little piece there to kind of just show kind of this overall summary. And we would be looking at programs to increase the availability of our Lifeline program and increase awareness. I know finance has done a lot of good work on that end already. Councilmember Swarthout.
When will we be looking at bringing these changes online?
This would be through the budgeting process, and so we're actually, considering that this change between 5.5% and 6%. Right now it's programmed in our budget at a 5.5% increase. And like I had said, a slight increase of 0.5%. Kind of gives us that longer term picture. These are this financial plan continues to change almost every single time I look at it, where we move a project out, we refine an estimate on a part of the project, things like that too. So these are constantly changing, probably right up into that point where we submit a rate resolution or the fee resolution for this year that addresses the rates.
Okay, that was one of the things that I know we had conversation the other night at council. A good thing is that you do. One of the council members talked about our fees, and I do appreciate the fact that we do have proposed you do have them factored out through 2031, which is kind of nice to be able to see that number. But also too, now you're saying that we do have that the potential that they could be tweaked, and so it sounds like that we're going to have to do a little adjustment this year. So.
Yeah, as it stands today, I'm recommending that 0.5% increase on the water only. All the other ones, I've got programmed in, through 2026 as it was presented in the budget for this biennium. This would be the only change, and it's a minor change, as I said, 20 cents on a monthly basis, or even 2 cents when you look out into 2027 for 410 versus 408. So those changes based on what we've proposed and what we've seen in the capital facility plan is fairly minor. But the highlight is our connection fees are where they should be. And if the next slide serves me, well, no, maybe it's the last slide. One thing I wanted to also highlight is going through that process with our consultant, looking at our rates. They were recommending, because this is where we're at this year. We did this year. They programmed in the 5.5%, as we had programmed in with our budget, and as we have proposed in this top line here. But they then said you need to come back the following year, given the nature of your capital projects, the demands on your operations and maintenance, you need to raise your rates 19.5%. And while when you look at it from a singular utility standpoint, um, it might not be as impactful when you collectively look at our utility bills again. That's where the full impact can be seen. And I'd like to say that I was able to kind of meet the same need looking out, but this is where, if we were to raise that 19.5%, we wouldn't see, the reserve policy impacts that we're seeing here. We would see that our rate efficacy would remain above 1 here. And that was their task, was to make sure that, we stayed above 1 and we always met our reserve policies. So this is where, kind of some of the nuanced work with finance will be kind of looking at our policies, looking at our financial projections, seeing what has changed at any given moment. Again, this is 2 years out. We're already looking at this. It's not for this year or next year or 26 or 27, but it would be the second half of the next biennium that we would start to recognize that there is again, while we're maintaining a fund balance and a healthy fund balance, we're outside of our reserve policy where we would like to be. And so that's where we want to kind of continuously reevaluate. But the 19.5%, as I think our consultant recognizes, is an untenable increase for us to realize. And so that's where we're trying to move projects out, and I think you would ask at one point, like, you have this scheduled for 2 years out, is that necessary? Again, if we can find grant funding, we can move some things around that can expedite a project, but is it a high priority today to kind of force us to consider a 20% increase on rates in any given year? And that's kind of the balance work that we do behind the scenes on a routine basis. But that 0.5% increase, which I was talking about between what was proposed at 5.5%, and I know I'm jumping all around with this mouse, this 5.5% to a 6%, brings us back up to our rates are meeting our operational needs, and we are closer, $500,000 versus like $700,000 in these years of coming closer to that reserve, being in that reserve. And so that again is kind of the balance of where we're at. I think everybody in our work group was recognizing 19.5% increase, which is not untenable. What projects can we push out? What can we delay a little bit? Where can we find other efficiencies within this work? So that's what we tried to do here. That was a lot of information, and it gets thick pretty quick. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to try and probably polish up this presentation a little bit in terms of how I'm giving it out there. We're going to be doing this again next week for the Planning Commission. And then I believe at some future moment, coming back to the City Council at a work session for a review before Council adopts the full program in early December. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Early October briefing for you. Next week, I do a briefing for Planning Commission. And then there, as I understand it, there's a public hearing after that, and then general committee briefing, and then council work session and adoption, as I mentioned. So that's all of what I got for you today. I think that was it.
All right. That was it. I love numbers. I love public works. I love the work you're doing. Man, there's just a lot of projects that are coming up in the water world in the next years, as well as, so a lot going on.
And some big ones. And, I also just want to add to some of the big challenges we face was resource limitations, not just from a money perspective, but a capacity perspective. And last year and through this year's biennium budget, council, authorized, some significant increases to staff capacity on the water resources side. And so just next week, on next Thursday, on the 16th, we're bringing on 4 new staff members, a deputy director for the city, or for the water resource, for the administrative side, 2 operational maintenance techs, that kind of rounds out all of our teams there, fully staffing our teams, and a water conservation professional that is coming to us and to really take reins of the water conservation program and find that new source of water, upwards of 20% of our current water right portfolio, to help future growth planning and meet those needs of the future. And so that's really exciting for us next week. Those 4 new folks are going to be here. Our deputy director comes from us from a lot, and a lot excellent staff. They do excellent work, and their capital programs. Capital program manager will be coming, and he'll become our deputy director here. And so you can guess that he's going to be doing a lot of work with us on our capital projects, through across all of our utilities. But his first major project will be leading, the Trosper sewer extension work, with our transportation engineering staff. And so there's a lot of work to get on the ground, as you mentioned. Big projects. These aren't just small projects scattered about. We have some few very big projects that are about to get underway, and with the work that the organization did in resource planning for staff resources over the last couple of years has really paid off. And we're competitive in the market. We're attracting great talent, and we're building capacity. So all of those things are great successes for moving this stuff forward.
That's really awesome. It'll be nice to see after that septic summit so many years ago to go back and try to redo that again and just see how many red dots are off our map now since that time frame. Because I think about the areas that like where the apartments that we connected in Velcomen and the different places that we've been able to make because of grants and different projects that you've been able to do, that we've been able to chip away at those red dots.
Well, the 93rd extension project with the Southeast Reservoir, that has the potential to run adjacent to another high priority site, high priority multi septic system site. And Velcomen we should be done, I think, by the end of November with that project, and have all those facilities converted over. We'll be bringing that closeout project to y'all for your review. Yeah, that's exciting, and then that would be that next step for our sewer staff is to kind of put that program together and bring that back for y'all to take a look at as well.
Yeah, I know sometimes it looks so big, but just to be able to chip away at it down, it's great. It's good work. So, thank you. All right. Well, with that, do we have any other additional items to bring forward? Okay. Well, with that, then I will call the Thursday, October 9th, 2025 Public Works Committee for the City of Tumwater adjourned. Go out there and have a great day, you guys. All right, thank you.